Hello, welcome to another episode of Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder, and with me today is Hilary James.
Hello.
AKA Bathtub Sig. Welcome.
Thank you.
We've had many interviews focusing on many bands and projects that you've been in. The most recent one, I was on the other side of the planet, of course. And actually that was regarding Bed, the EP before, just released before this LP. And I love this LP, Night Blindness, the first full length from Bathtub Sig. How did the creation of those two records relate? What was the chronology of the creation of the two records?
Yeah, so that is the most recent record or group of songs that I wrote.
Yes.
But it came out before Night Blindness. So Night Blindness was all done, just completely done in like, I think April of 2020. The last thing I did before the pandemic hit in March of 2020 was drive to Chicago with Addie, who also plays in Bathtub Sig.
Yeah, and who produced Bed.
Yes, and who produced and recorded Bed, yeah. We drove to Chicago to mix the record, to mix Night Blindness with Eric Littman, our friend, who also kind of co-produced Night Blindness. Yes.
Excellent.
And then the world shut down.
Yes.
So the goal was to hopefully release Night Blindness in the summer of 2020. And obviously that's when George Floyd was murdered, and it was like, this is not a good time to like be promoting your own stuff or like to be taking away attention and energy from obviously a really, really important movement.
Yeah, I love how intentional you are about how you put out the music. There's a lot of intention. I think intention is an important theme in the record in a way. We're going to take a journey through the songs. I recognize that they kind of fit nicely together as pairs. So we'll begin with the song Therapy, in part because I just love the video, which was created, of course, by Peter Miller.
Yes, it's incredible. He has such a just genius brain and genius eye for everything.
Yeah. Well, Addie said that the video encapsulates Hilary's spirit and the city that she wrote all of these tunes in and about. It's simple and saturated with personality. And then referencing the genre depression pop or depression rock, the local Current said, "Careful, this colorful clip might just cheer you up," and it does. I think because of what Addie highlights, that it does kind of encapsulate your personality. Could you talk a little bit about creating that video with Peter?
Yeah. So rewinding a little bit, Peter's one of my like dearest and longest friends that I've had, and we play in a couple other bands together too.
Yeah. We Are the Willows is one.
We Are the Willows.
And then I really enjoyed seeing the two of you perform together as a duo. What's that project? Is that still
Inside Voice?
Yeah, Inside Voice.
So that's kind of taken a pause, mostly because of my mental health, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I was just in too many bands and trying to do too much and like work 5 jobs to like pay my bills and still like be able to make records and music. And I was just overtired and overworked, and was putting my mental health kind of on a back burner, and just needed to come to a breaking point to be like, oh, my medication isn't working, like I need to get new medication and like take a pause on a few things so I can kind of reset.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So obviously my meds are working now, and like going to therapy regularly again, and the pandemic has kind of forced a pause on a lot of music stuff, so it feels like there's more space now to kind of come back to some projects.
Yeah, to consciously reintegrate whilst maintaining the equilibrium.
Yeah, and also remember, like, you like music. Because I think there's some times where I forgot that, which is super weird.
You like music and making music with your trusted friends.
Yes, exactly. And it's good for me, and yeah.
Okay, so that's who Peter is.
Yeah.
It came out so well, that music video. Could you elaborate a little bit on how you and Peter worked together to create that video?
Yeah, so he would pick me up in his big van, and then for like 2 hours once a week, we would just drive around or walk around my neighborhood. I live in South Minneapolis, and we would just be like, ooh, that's like a pretty color wall, or like, ooh, this looks nice. Or Pete would have some ideas in mind of like, oh, there's this really cool mural here. Or I'd be like, oh, I saw this thing the other day. And we were just, I'd like pick a color to wear that day, and then, yeah, we would just kind of shoot videos of me like walking and singing, which is the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done in my life. That's not my favorite thing to do, but hanging out with my friend Pete is great.
Yeah, you're clearly enjoying yourself in the video and kind of playing with that sense of discomfort.
Yeah.
It's really great to see, and the dancing at the beginning, or just rhythm. I think rhythm is so important in relation to mental health.
Yeah.
And it's particularly here at the beginning of the video, that's very evident, and the head bobbing.
Yes, I think that's totally true. And for me, like a big part of how I take care of my mental health is like moving my body.
Yeah.
And I think the song Therapy itself too kind of talks about that. Like there's a sense of like moving forward and plugging forward, and like pedaling a bicycle or pushing your feet to go roller skating. And I think too, the idea of those things with wheels, where sometimes you're kind of moving something and you're like, is this going anywhere? I don't know, but it's like doing this thing over and over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden you've biked like 60 miles. But in the moment, you're like, this wheel is just turning.
Yes.
And mental health, or like bettering yourself, or working on parts of yourself that are not where you want them to be, is kind of like that, of like, okay, you just like tap every day away at it, and it feels like you're not getting anywhere some days. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, cool, I feel better. And I didn't like necessarily like each day I was like, I'm feeling 0.1% better today and less depressed. It's just like kind of happens.
Yeah, that's the compound effect of the commitment to, okay, everything points towards, if I do this, if I apply this pressure. The fact that the main recurring focus on this in the song is this applying of pressure, light pressure with our feet. I just think that's so perfect. Something I love about all of your songs is the subtle progression through verses. So there'll be these little shifts where something stays and something shifts, and the thing that stays in verse 1 and from verse 1 into verse 2 is this pushing of the feet. And of course, what shifts is, you know, in the first verse, we're riding the bike to therapy and we're pushing our feet into the steel. In the second verse, we're going roller skating, and now we'll push our feet into the floor. So a difference is that now there are two people simultaneously doing something with their feet. But it's more or less the same applying of pressure. Could you reflect on any of those subtle continuities and differences from verse 1 to verse 2?
I never put any thought into my lyrics, and so it's really always funny, like having conversations with you, and I'm like, yes, I was very smart about that, but it wasn't.
I think it is clever, even though it's not perhaps your conscious mind that's doing it. Something is happening with the shift from I to we to you. Those words, obviously, are going to show up in most records, but the way in which they show up and the way in which they shift in this record, I think, is really intriguing, and I think relates to the journey that we're invited to go on in the record. So yeah, maybe we'll come back to this image of the shift from me pushing my feet into the steel, and then us pushing our feet into the floor when we're roller skating.
Yeah.
Having visited some other I's, we's, you's
Yeah.
throughout the record.
And I do think that, like, not to like always bring it back to mental health and stuff,
Yes.
but it does, like, especially in the first verse, it's like, okay, I'm working on myself, and that's, I think, the most important thing to do. But then because I'm figuring out my shit and like figuring out my brain chemicals and things like that, I am able to be like more present in life with other people, which I think is what life is about, is like making connections. And
Definitely, I think so too.
yeah,
Yeah. And there are moments in the record where I think that there is an intelligent, kind of warranted concern about connection with another person. Here, though, with the shift from me to we, a pattern is established, a healthy pattern. The pushing of the feet related to this compound effect of, I'll ride to therapy every week, I'll go roller skating, and then that pattern kind of expands, and others are included in this pattern. But the fact that it starts with oneself, I think, is key.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, kind of the layout of the track listing of the record, it kind of follows like a mental health journey in context of a relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
So
And
the
I think
sequencing is key, I think.
Sequencing is key for this, yeah. And also kind of the starting with the I, everything, because sometimes depression can be very inward and isolating and selfish, even if it's unintentionally selfish. It's like you're in this horrible bubble that's like only has room for yourself in it. And then when you are able to like get the help for that, there's like suddenly room for another person and room for like other people and friendships and like just life in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what you were saying about the I versus the we is actually really important in this record.
I think so too. And the song that, we'll turn to it in a moment, the song that establishes that is track number 1, I think. There's some really interesting stuff is happening there. One final feature about the song Therapy, there's a reference to neon lights. In the previous song, again, I think the sequencing is key. In Champagne, we're addressing someone, you will always be the neon sign that shines so brightly, then goes dark in time. So there, another person is seen as like the source of light, and there's some trepidation, fear about whether that light source will be there when we need it. I think this relates to night blindness.
Yeah.
But here, we're roller skating, and we surround ourselves in neon light. So here we have the two people together, and they're contained. You know, the we is contained in the neon light. Those are just a couple of the references to light. There's another moment where someone is smiling under a street light. So perhaps in relation to the title of the record, Night Blindness, what's happening here with the sequencing, with the shift from looking to someone else to be the neon sign, to then us being surrounded, us choosing to surround ourselves in neon light?
I have night blindness, which is a lot of people with astigmatisms have it. It just feels like it fit the record because darkness and light in the context of this record is, I think, really important. And like in Champagne, what you were referencing with the "You will always be the neon sign," is kind of like looking towards other people to be like, will you, like, I'm holding, like, you are my life raft. And that's obviously a lot to expect from someone and is unfair and unhealthy and not sustainable, really, to be like, you have to be my everything. You have to be this only source of happiness and the only thing that's like keeping me from off in it, you know, or and then versus choosing in therapy of like, cool, first of all, there are just neon lights that are amazing at roller skating rinks. And second of all, like, we can both kind of carry our own neon signs on our backs. And then we both have light that we don't have to, that we can enjoy, but we don't have to depend on it from the other person.
Yeah. I love how the record as well kind of charts this journey of like kindling this light within, kindling the flame of the light within.
Yeah.
And then I think by the time we get to the song Therapy, we've acquired that habit and we know what it takes to keep the flame alight or to kind of let the flame build and to share the flame and to guard the flame, to make sure that when we're in these social interactions, we're not putting ourselves in a situation where there's risk of, you know, that flame being kind of blown out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's begin at the beginning then, because the sequencing is key.
And it's a very good place to start.
Yeah, and I love that the first sentence on the record is, I wish I could pray. By the time we get to the first sentence of the second verse of I Want to Believe, I wish you would stay. And so this is another instance where verse 1 kind of establishes a pattern, and then there's continuity and difference with verse 2. So in verse 1, there's yearning. Praying can be seen as a form of yearning. But the person here, the character as we meet her in Act 1, Scene 1, is kind of yearning to be able to yearn in the way that people do when they pray. But that kind of seems too much. Like prayer, the practice of praying, as much as we see it helping people, some people, seems to demand beliefs that this character doesn't presently have. And so it's just such a perfect starting point, sequencing is key again, where we're recognizing that behind every kind of system of actions, like maybe later on we're roller skating, we're riding our bike to therapy and so on, is a system of beliefs. And this character is yearning at the end, there's repetition of, I want to believe in anything. I want to feel anything but this. And that's the starting point, this yearning. Could you expand a bit more in general and or through reference to other details in the song on this yearning to believe something different than what one believes, and this yearning to feel anything but what one feels? They're related, but they're different. This yearning to believe something different, this yearning to feel something different. Could you expand a bit more on that and how and why that's Act 1, Scene 1?
Yeah. So this is Act 1, Scene 1 because it's kind of laying out the credo, is that the right? Yeah, like the set of beliefs of like where we're at in this moment. I'm not religious, but I sometimes wish that I could like believe that strongly in anything. And just that idea too of kind of looking outwards of yourself to like find, like, if you believe in God, of that's, to me, I wish I could believe in God, because it seems so helpful to be like, well, this thing happened, but there's like, I don't have to figure out why, because there's a higher power that's kind of guiding me and telling me that like everything's happening for a reason, you know.
There's a foundation there.
Yeah.
If belief in that whole system is presupposed, then there's a foundation.
Yeah.
And if belief in, and you know, the final lyric in the first verse, but I don't know where do we all go when we die? That's directly acknowledging that that isn't the belief system. That opening verse invites anyone to feel into the not knowing, which is, I would have thought, put in that general way, feeling into the not knowing is like a universal human thing.
Yeah.
So even the person who does subscribe to the belief system that provides a foundation, there's a component of not knowing.
Yeah.
And as scared as the person who has been taught to believe in this system might feel about feeling into the not knowing, I think the record is going to, with this being Act 1, Scene 1, take us on a journey. What happens when we feel into that not knowing? Something beyond belief. And I think that feeling, I want to feel anything but this, is key here. Do you agree, and do you have any further thoughts or feelings?
Yes, I always have feelings. Yeah, I think you're totally right about that, of even though it's like a very specific, coming from a specific place, that everyone in life can relate to uncertainty and not knowing, and just like, what the heck is life? Type of situation. And kind of the end chorus, which you were just quoting, can also be taken in two different ways. Kind of the hyper-personal way for me when I wrote this was like just kind of deep in depression, and like I was just so numb, besides just like just feeling so sad.
Yeah.
And so just like, can I feel anything? Anything besides just this? And like, can I believe that I can get better? And can I believe in like anything outside of this depression bubble? But also in kind of the larger context, like what do I believe in as a person? Like, what are my core values? What do I want to feel to all the time? I heard this quote that was like, act like the person you want to become. And I think that also for me includes feelings when I think about that. Like, how do I want to feel on a daily basis? And like, how do I want my friends to feel when I interact with them? And while there is a component of mental illness that you're not choosing to feel that way, and I think there's a lot of stigma around that, of like, well, just feel better, you know, just smile, start laughing, and then you're gonna feel fine. And from my experience, and all my friends that have mental illnesses too, from their experience, it's like, no, like there's a certain brain chemistry thing going on, and you can't be like, I'm gonna have a good day today, until you get to a point with like help from either medication or therapy or XYZ, all the other things that you can do. And then you can like start shaping how you feel. But there's also, you know, you have to get to a certain place of health before you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no toxic positivity in this record.
Yeah, no.
It's definitely a complete absence of toxic positivity. And for that to be the case, alongside this very grounded, experiential sharing of the process of getting to and being at and committing to being at a place where this, where it is possible to become oneself through working with the feelings. It's so interesting that feeling and belief come up in the way that they do, as related as different, in this song. Because I think that although one way of thinking about prayer, which we're invited to think about in the first verse, one way of thinking about prayer is something that one does when one subscribes to the belief system that warrants that whole practice. I think feeling is central to prayer too. And to some extent, I think when we write certain songs, like a song is like a prayer. What do you think of that analogy? Like if you put the feeling and the thoughts into a song, this is what I want. Here, I wish I could pray. There's a sense in which you kind of are doing something analogous to praying, at least, through putting those thoughts and feelings into the song.
That's so beautiful. I've never thought about that before, and I love that. Wow.
Are songs prayers? Are songs like prayers, at least, do you think?
Well, I guess praying is just, like you said, putting something out into the universe.
Yes.
So, I guess so. And I guess like being, kind of going back to intention, I think songwriting for me is a huge way of kind of, like my brain is just like filled all the time with so many things, and I'm like, I'm like feeling this, but I don't know what I'm feeling or how to articulate these thoughts. And so by writing songs, that's like, okay, or journaling or whatever, like talking with friends, that kind of filters out and turns it into something so I can figure it out. And so I think that is true.
Yeah.
Oh, I really like that, Simon.
I mean, I think music is so important, and I spend a lot of time focusing on the act of songwriting.
Yeah.
And what that, the habit of songwriting, what role that plays in lots of people's lives. And I think it really is analogous to prayer in terms of putting something out into the universe. And the person who was turning to songwriting to put stuff out, as opposed to turning explicitly to something which is thought of intentionally as prayer, might find themselves giving expression to and honoring feelings and thoughts that the helpful foundational belief system over here might get in the way of us being able to access otherwise, because it's kind of taboo. But something very magical happens when we do connect with and honor those potentially taboo thoughts and feelings, and recognize, well, what does that part of me really yearn for? And allowing that part to evolve into more whole expression. Is something like that happening in the record, do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you expand a bit more on that?
Yeah.